What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning in for another video. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. We're still doing 3 videos a week, so we don't want you to miss out on any of those future videos. Well, it is getting to be the time of year where those bass really start schooling. And what does schooling mean? Schooling means they're going to be busting on the surface, chasing this year's hatch of shad. So here in Tennessee, it's going to be threadfin shad. The type of forage may vary on the fishery that you're at. But really, as you get into late summer, into the fall, there's a lot of surface activity, fish blowing up on the surface. And a lot of times they're chasing really small forage because, like I said, it's this year's hatch. So it's really hard to trigger some of those fish sometimes. It's hard to cast a bait that is that small accurately at those fish that are schooling. And I've kind of developed a setup for schooling fish that I feel like is the best setup for schooling fish. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the whole setup. I'm going to rig one up here with you guys, walk you through. It's a little bit long process. It's a long process. Let's be real. It's very intricate on how you rig this up, but I promise you, if you take this setup to any fish that are schooling, you're going to get some bites. This setup will catch bass anywhere you go in the country if they're busting on the surface. So if you guys are ready, let's jump in and let's start this process. Let's get the ultimate schooling rig rigged up, ready to go fishing. Okay, so there is a lot of pieces to this puzzle, which in turn is going to help you catch some bass. But there is a lot of things to set up with this. And it's just a very intricate process. So like I said, with the schooling fish, you know, typically they're going to be hitting the surface. So you're going to be kind of waiting and making extremely accurate casts to when you see those fish hit the surface. So for me, I actually like throwing on a spinning rod. You'll kind of see as this process goes along, but I really like a spinning rod. I feel like I can cast it more accurately and just as far with small baits. So I prefer a spinning rod over a bait caster. Now, this is just a 7-foot medium heavy spinning rod, nothing fancy there. The key to the whole setup here on the spinning rod side of things is going to be the line. This is the Seaguar PEX8 braided line. Super thin diameter, smooth casting line. It really helps you get those long casts out of it. So that's going to be super important to this whole process here. So first step to this is going to be a swivel, actually 2 swivels. So what you're going to do is essentially what we're creating here is a donkey rig or a double fluke rig is the whole idea here, but it's going to be a little more detailed than just your standard donkey rig, if you will. So the start of this rig is going to be 2 swivels. You're gonna slide 1 swivel onto the braided line and not tie it. So you're just gonna slide him up on your braided line just like that and let him free fall. That's gonna be the second fluke option that you have there. That's gonna be the second minnow that's kind of sliding, free dancing. And then you're gonna take the second swivel and tie your braided line to him. And that's going to create the double here in a moment. So we're going to tie him on. Directly to the braided line. All right. Okay, so he's tied on. Now we have a swivel. We have 2 swivels on our line. That's all we have right here. So you can see I have one that's tied on and then one that's free floating off the back. So the next step is we're going to tie our leaders on both of these right here. So I'm going to quickly tie on some leader. Now, schooling fish, generally you don't need to use extremely light line. This is going to be a fairly short leader on there, so I'm actually going to throw fairly heavy line. I'm going to put 15-pound fluorocarbon on there. I believe I have a spool right here in the boat. Right here, I have some 15-pound Seagar Tatsu. You don't need to use a high-end fluorocarbon for this, but this is just what I have in the boat right here. So that's what we're using. And now we're gonna tie a short leader. I'm gonna leave it about 18 inches, and I may shorten it up as when we actually rig up the bait on the other end of this. So I'm gonna tie these 2 quick leaders here real quick. Okay, there's one. Like I said, I'm gonna leave about 18 inches of line on him. Cut that. Let's bring my other swivel down here. And now you could tie this leader on to the swivels before you attach it to the braid. There's nothing wrong with that either. It's just kind of what your preference is and how you're feeling that day. I just wanted to go from the start and rig up the swivels first. Okay, let's get our second leader tied on here. And leave about the same distance there. Okay, so now you're done with the line. Let's put him off to the side. Okay, so now you've got your double leaders set up here just like that on your swivels. Now it's time to get down to the baits. So like I said, you want to be throwing a smaller style bait when the fish are schooling on those small bait fish of the year. So I like to go with a smaller minnow style bait. I had him backwards. That is a Zoom Super Fluke Junior is an excellent choice. He dances and darts really well. Another excellent choice that doesn't really get talked about a lot is like a 3-inch scope shad or any 3-inch minnow style bait that's designed for, your jig head minnow. He looks just like those little shad that they're feeding on. And then when we rig him up, so we're gonna actually use him for this rig here. I really like using this. So this is actually the violet flash color as well. It's a very bright chrome-ish color, flashes really well. And you're moving this bait really fast. So they're not getting a good look at your bait and they just see that flash. It looks like one of those little minnows that may be injured or just dancing around. So it just really flashes and darts and dances really well and catches those fish for you. So we're gonna use the 3-inch scope shad, and then what we're gonna rig them up on is this guy right here, the Core Tackle Scamper Rig. So this is actually where you're adding a little bit of weight to help you cast this bait. If you could just rig him up on a straight shank hook or whatnot, but then this rig is gonna be very light. So I'm taking the Core Tackle Scamper Rig. This is the 2/0 hook, 1/32 ounce. So it's fairly lightweight. There's not a whole lot of lead here, but adding 2 of those together, that, obviously doubles the weight. So that's gonna bring it up to a 1/16 of an ounce. Add in the weight of the 2 minnow style baits, the swivels, whatnot. It actually, ends up being probably closer to a 1/4 ounce. So you're able to cast them, like you would, any other finesse bait on your spinning rod. He's gonna end up casting pretty well. Okay, so I'm gonna take these scamper rigs and I'm gonna tie them on first. This is kind of key here for the next step, is I like to tie them on before I rig my bait up, because I like to use super glue on my scamper rig. And if you don't tie him to your line first, I always seem to end up with super glue on my fingers or in my mouth somehow, and when you're wetting the fluorocarbon like that. So I always like to tie them on before I rig the bait, because then I can put some super glue on there and not have to worry about where it ends up. So let's tie both of those on here. We're getting close, guys. I told you this is a very, very detailed process. It takes a while. This is something that you definitely want to rig up before you go out on the water, because you don't want to be wasting precious time once you're out on the water fishing if you don't have to. Okay, so we got our 2 scamper rigs rigged up now. Now let's rig up our 2 scope sheds. So there is actually a flat side on these scope sheds. I always like to bring the hook through that. That way it kind of keeps the keel down, helps this bait swim. And it actually, you know, the scamper rig actually adds a little vibration to these baits. So I'm going to take my super glue like we talked about before I finish putting him all the way up over the lead. Come on. We might have a dead super glue. There he goes. Okay, got us a little super glue on that one. Slide him up and over like that. Let's do the same thing on this one. But now we are there, and I feel like this is the ultimate schooling fish rig right here. You know, this is something I've messed with. I've tweaked with this for years and years, and finally settled on this. So if you're faced with bass that are schooling on shad and you can't catch them, I promise you this guy right here will help you get some bites and be able to catch some of those fish. So that's the finished product right there, guys. You see we have the braided line down to a swivel and another free floating swivel on the back here. And then we have 2 scamper rigs with the 3-inch scope shad. Now, like I said, you can use any small minnow style bait for this. It doesn't really matter. You know, you're going to be moving this bait really fast, dancing, darting, not letting the fish get a good look at it. And that's going to be key in how you fish this bait. So like I said, now we got a little bit of weight on there. You can cast this on the spinning rod. You're going to whip it out there as fast as you can. And then once that bait lands, you know, you're using your rod to sweep this bait. You know, you're kind of sweeping your rod tip side to side, moving it, twitching it, darting it. And honestly, once you get it to where those fish are schooling, it's not going to take them long to see this, find this, and there'll be a boiling on it. And honestly, I've even caught 2 at a time on this bait, because you got 2 baits there. When those fish are up feeding hot and heavy, a lot of times there's more than 1 fish up there. And you can even double up on this, and that's pretty fun when that happens. So that right there, guys, that is a sneaky good schooling fish rig right here. I don't even know what to call this. I guess it's technically a double fluke rig or a donkey rig, as some people say. But, you know, adding that scamper rig on there adds a little bit of weight, and it adds, you know, the scamper rig action with the vibration that it adds into the bait, and really awesome way to catch those fish. So hopefully you guys learned something from this. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Appreciate you tuning in. As always, leave me those likes and comments and good stuff down below. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys next time.